Political parties with less than 2 hours to go until the polls close.
Well, the concern now is lower voter turnout and the impact of bad weather. eNCA's Aviwe Mtila is tracking developments for us from the Windy City, and he joins us live now from Port Elizabeth. Aviwe, lots of concern around voter turnout, especially impacted by weather conditions. Can you tell us the current status quo?
Well, it was certainly a glaring issue from the morning, even before the weather actually kicked in, the rain this side in Port Elizabeth, before it even kicked in. You could see, just driving around the townships, the various voting stations there, the turnout wasn't really impressive. It was quite dry and empty, if I can put it that way. It was further worsened by the weather, especially the tent voting stations, the 34 tent voting stations in the Nelson Mandela Bay region. 5 of them actually had to be relocated with emergency because essentially they were falling apart. They couldn't operate anymore. So the IEC had to make rapid plans in order to get voting going. I remember in eNCA, which is in the dispatch area, voting there stopped at around 12 o'clock and eventually picked up only after 3 o'clock. Eventually, once they'd actually located another voting area and actually had moved the ballot boxes. What was really concerning there was the issue of the IEC officials not being present at the previous tent where they were alerting people. I had to actually direct a number of people myself to where the new voting station was. So you can only imagine how the voter turnout was impacted in the Nelson Mandela Bay region.
Well, Aviwe, a lot of tents collapsed, which were temporary structures. A lot of people criticizing the IEC for erecting those structures instead of opting for more permanent structures like schools. What have they had to say about that criticism?
Well, it's one of the issues that I picked up with Crosby Bagela, who is the regional supervisor here in the Nelson Mandela Bay. He is currently unavailable now for an interview, but we spoke over the phone extensively on some of those issues. He did say that it was emergency plans. The tents, they're trying to reduce the number of tents in the region. They have 34 currently, but they were trying to reduce that number, and they had no other alternatives. They had no provisions, in fact, for the rain. They didn't make any provisions, saying that they even had to ask churches, nearby churches, who didn't give them permission prior to actually set up voting stations there. So they had to make emergency plans and actually just make plans that will accommodate that situation. They didn't foresee the rain, and they didn't have provisions in place for the rain, for example, Butwe.
So what's going to happen, or what provisions were then made to ensure that those people that were supposed to vote at those temporary structures do not get disenfranchised?
Well, in the Nandi voting station that we were in at the dispatch, they were actually moved to a nearby RDP house that hadn't had people move in as yet. So they opened up the RDP house and actually set up a voting station there. There wasn't electricity the last time I checked there, and the people were actually lined up outside in the rain. That's another health concern for myself doing live crossings outside there. It was quite freezing myself with the jacket on for 5 to 10 minutes when I was there. So you can only imagine for the people on the ground facing that rain outside. I saw a lady with a child on her back and actually wanting to go vote. So it's one of the issues that actually discouraged a number of voters from actually standing in those queues in that rain to actually cast their vote.
Aviwe Mtila live from the Nelson Mandela Bay, where there were some problems, as he has just said. A lot of temporary structures were erected in the form of tents, and due to rain and some really bad weather, those structures